Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. And I'm really appreciative of the CFDE and the K Club for sponsoring this session and for inviting me to share some experiences with you. And I tried to also speak to some of my colleagues about some of the experiences they had had so I could share a few more anecdotes as well as give you some examples of things that we've dealt with. So the talk from failure to success. The word failure, I really don't like that word. I don't think anyone likes, kind of sees that word resonates with them, not with the people who are here in this room. So I kind of like to think of it as maybe not now or not this, but it's something that we do know that there are roadblocks and dips. So interesting, I have a calendar that has some supposed to be inspirational sayings, and so this is what came up this week. Don't be afraid to fail. You're already super good at it. So I'm like, well, thank you. But so some of the things that I think are the most that we hold high value for in academia are grants and manuscripts. And so those are two of the things that I'm going to focus a little bit more on in terms of failures and successes there. And, when you get a really crushing critique, and certainly I've had many of those from a manuscript or a grant, some of the things that have been helpful are to just step back. Once again, if you get it and you read it and it's difficult, and they are difficult because I've never had a manuscript or a grant accepted or funded on the first try. Now, some people have, and that's wonderful, but it's always that persistence that you've got to go back. And so if it's really bad, I just step back and I put it aside and I pick it up another day. I get mad. I say, that's ridiculous. Blow off steam. That's the stupid reviewer. They just didn't see it. But then come back to it at a better time. And I also will take a few minutes to reread the positive. As Carlos said, the things that say, good things about your team or your environment or, the topic, the significance. So things that really are positive and sort of refocus on why I'm doing this particular thing. What's my passion for this? Why do I care about people with heart failure who get readmitted over and over? Or why do I care about a particular thing that I'm trying to write about? So that kind of gets your enthusiasm back up. So I try to do it the next day, to pick it back up the next day. Now, some of my colleagues say, wait a week, wait a month. I think it just is going to depend on you, and if you can get to your safe space, find that right time. But most of the time is of the essence when the tenure clock is ticking, right? So waiting may not be the best thing, and we don't give a lot of what counts are the outcomes, the acceptances, and the funding. The effort frequently doesn't get that much attention, which I don't think is totally correct, but that is what ends up being counted. So I think you have to balance the timing. Don't wait too long. And then I make a list of everything that I'm going to address. You just make that list of things that you are going to revise, points of contention, certainly, that things you don't agree with in the reviewers, and then also points for revision. And points of contention are interesting. They're, reviewers really don't like to be told that they're wrong or that they missed something, but sometimes they are. And so there's kind of this tack that you can do in your revision and your response to reviewers that might say, we appreciate this point, but we respectfully disagree and believe that this manuscript, for example, provides a unique perspective or changes the paradigm, or something that you can say, and then you can say, but we have tried to make this clearer. So sometimes you have to thank your reviewers, respectfully disagree, and then say how you're going to clarify. I've had reviewers say things like, oh, a biosketch wasn't included. Well, and it was. So, you're like, we're sorry that it wasn't apparent in your revision, and you say, and we made sure it was there, rather than saying, you idiot, it was there. So, and then, just thinking about those things, I think it's helpful to talk to your mentor and co-authors and others about the revision. And others can certainly have helped me reword things and revise things so that they're not maybe as defensive or as angry sounding. And that's really important, is to do your revision, response to reviewers, and then go back and edit that again and make sure that that's really toned down. I find that talking to others is really helpful, and they can sometimes help me clarify a point, especially if they haven't been involved in the project or they're from another discipline, if they're willing to do that. And I have a colleague who says she always goes to an attorney friend because that person helps her make a better case. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then because I'm just action-oriented, and some people cope differently, as you heard, denial and those types of things, I just get started, just get back in there and get started. Here's some more strategies in talking with others, and I'll give you some examples from myself as well, is that sometimes manuscripts, you may need to complete additional analysis. So you have to ask, do you have the right statistician? Do you need to add more statistical help to the team for that particular manuscript? And sometimes it may not be the right journal. And I've found that I have a colleague who has a list of journals, and they just go down the list. They don't make they make minor revisions. But if that journal didn't accept it, they go to the next, and they just go down until it gets accepted. That's not a strategy that I find helpful. We don't have that many journals in nursing, and so we have to go back in sometimes, and that is the best place to go. But if it's not right, then select another. The same might be true with grants. And for example, we recently submitted an NSF grant for altering an intervention for heart failure patients to make it a technologically web-based intervention versus a face-to-face counseling. And we sent it to NSF because they had a call for technology-based approaches to measuring clinical outcomes. And what we found was what was really of interest to NSF was the technology and the backbone of the way things were going to be done, not the real focus I had on the clinical intervention. So that wasn't the right mechanism, but now we do have something to work with and can go to a more clinically focused funding agency. And then, again, setting up the meeting with the team and going through the points of the critique, especially for a grant, and working with the interdisciplinary team to figure out what really can be done to address a critique. So here's another example where I was working with a colleague, and she wanted to do a family-focused study for survivors of stroke and their family caregivers. And she submitted a grant, but she really did not have preliminary data. She had good data on the stroke survivor, but not on the family. And so it's sort of, you're in this chicken and egg thing. Well, I need funding to do the study to get the preliminary data, but they didn't like that. So the team came together and helped her think about how she could append her study to an ongoing clinical trial. And so there was already an infrastructure of a trial, and they helped her figure out how she could get that preliminary data without a lot of additional funds. In fact, it was basically sweat equity that she had to put into it to collect the data, but it worked out. And later she did get an R01, so that was great. So several people also, when I asked them what they found helpful, they said they stepped back and did something completely different so that they could get some new ideas. And it is amazing how when you step back and do something that you really enjoy, part of your leisure, just work on something else and then come back to that project that was so crushing that that you can come up with some new ideas. So giving your brain time away from it. So here's some other examples from serving as a mentor, and is sharing examples of experiences that you've had when you're a mentor, telling your mentee, you know, I've lived through this. You will get over it, and that there have been worse reviews that people have been able to overcome. So I think it's helpful to know that we all go through this and have these experiences. One of the stories that one of my colleagues told me had to do with getting a grant critique where the reviewer said, nobody cares about postpartum fatigue. No one's going to fund that because it's not really important. What they care about is postpartum depression, because that's what costs the system. And so she was really annoyed because she knows postpartum fatigue is real to mothers. And so what she was able to do, though, was recraft her work to study postpartum depression, of which fatigue is a critical piece. So by just reformulating and stepping back, and it's really hard to do because we love our topic and we love what we do, right? You're passionate about it or you wouldn't be doing it. But sometimes the advice that you get from reviewers is good, and you know, we have to accept it gracefully. I find that the point about talking to the program officer is critical. And the program officer that I've worked with over the years at NINR has been terrific. They have really helped me see sometimes the perspective of the reviewer that I couldn't see. And here's an example. Sometimes the reviewers, here's an example of a recent grant we submitted where the reviewer kind of went crazy and said, you know, this doesn't include this and that, and it doesn't have a palliative care perspective on these symptoms, and went on and on. Well, the grant was not about palliative care, but the reviewer was, and the NINR priorities have palliative care in it. So the program officer told me, you had a rogue reviewer. They actually used those words. You had a rogue reviewer who went off on palliative care, and so what you have to do is gently pull them back into the fold, and you have to kind of address that, you know, this is not a palliative care framework, it's a symptom science framework, and this could lead maybe to stronger palliative care studies. So kind of, you know, but I thought that was really helpful because I was so upset. How am I going to ever address palliative care? The advice to me was, no, you don't have to. Just pull them back in and help them see what you're really after. So, and the other thing that the program officer can do, and they're usually expecting your call, is help you think about the timeline and whether you really do have enough preliminary data. They don't want to fix your science. They don't want to address the scientific issues. They just want to give you guidelines on your resubmission and helping you address some of the critique. The other thing that I have on here is to have two primary foci. So one of the things that has helped me is to have two related programs of research where one is focusing on patients with complex cardiovascular issues and the other is focusing on the patient's, the family caregiver. And so there are times when I will submit a grant focused on heart failure patients. There are times when I will do a dyadic study, and there are times when I will focus on just the caregiver. And so I can be, while one is in review and I'm having to revise something, I can be working on the other one. I'll move along because I know this is running over. So this is just a you can think about this picture two ways. You can say, well, I'm looking in this mirror and I'm looking at what I aim to be, right? Or you can say, I'm looking in this mirror and I see I'm a cat looking at a lion, and I know I do not have the teeth or the knowledge or the skills to do what that lion needs to do. So maybe it is time sometimes to step back and say, what additional knowledge and skills do I need that will help strengthen my ability to do the work? And then the other is, you are the lion. Go for it. So, and then I like this quote from Kaplan, which says 15 priorities is the same as having none at all. So the idea there is, again, focus in what's the priority, and always keep moving forward. Thank you.